The sun had set, casting long shadows across the broken landscape. The girl sat on the cold ground, her small frame hunched over as she hugged the worn teddy bear to her chest. The once soft fur was matted and frayed, and the button eyes were dull, but to her it was everything. A symbol of the past, of warmth, of a life she once knew but had long since lost. Her clothes were ragged, and her face, though young, bore the marks of hardship. Dirt streaked across her cheeks, and her eyes were wide, full of fear and uncertainty. Her body trembled from the cold, but she made no move to get up. The teddy bear was all she had left, its threadbare paws clutched tightly, as if it could protect her from the world that had abandoned her. In the distance, a low rumble of thunder signaled the approach of a storm. The wind began to whip through the trees, sending leaves scattering in all directions. The girl flinched at each gust, instinctively pulling the bear tighter, as if the storm might tear her apart too. She had no one left, no family, no home, just the tattered keepsake in her arms. Then from the edge of the clearing came a sound, a low, steady footfall, accompanied by a soft growl. At first she thought it was the wind playing tricks on her, but then she saw them, a soldier clad in fatigues, his face weathered and tired, walking beside a massive K9, its fur the color of midnight. The dog's eyes locked onto her, sensing the danger she was in, its protective instincts kicking in. The soldier paused, surveying the scene. His gaze softened when he saw the girl, and he immediately knelt down, calling to the dog. "Stay," he whispered, his voice low but firm. The K9 obeyed, its eyes still trained on the girl, but the soldier continued his approach alone. He moved cautiously, every step measured as if trying to avoid startling her. When he was close enough, he spoke again, his voice gentle but filled with authority that came from years of experience. "Are you all right, kid?" The girl didn't answer at first. She stared at him through tear-streaked eyes, the bear still held tightly to her chest. The storm began to pick up, the wind howling as the first raindrops splattered on the ground. The soldier took another step closer, his eyes scanning the girl's condition. "You're cold," he said softly. "Come on, let's get you to cover." But she flinched as he moved closer, the fear in her eyes unmistakable. The soldier's hand hovered in the air, uncertain of how to comfort someone so broken, so lost. He hesitated, then slowly knelt down, his K9 now sitting beside him, sensing the girl's fear. "Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories." The girl's gaze flickered between him and the K9. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Can I keep this old teddy bear?" The 6T question hung in the air, fragile and full of unspoken longing. It wasn't just about the bear, it was about her life, her future, and whether she could keep anything that mattered in this cruel world. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the soldier heard it clearly. He didn't answer immediately. He understood the weight of the question, the depth of the pain it carried. The K9's eyes softened, as if urging him to find the right words. The soldier swallowed hard, trying to push down the emotions that threatened to surface. He reached out slowly, his hand steady as he touched her shoulder. "We're not going to let anything happen to you," he promised, his voice firm but filled with empathy. "You can keep that bear. We'll make sure you're safe." And in that moment, the bond between them began, unspoken, yet undeniable. A soldier, a dog, and a girl brought together by fate, each carrying their own scars and fears, but now united by the simple promise of protection and hope. But before they could move, the storm hit in full force. The wind howled as the rain poured down in sheets, the once tranquil scene now a battleground of nature. The soldier quickly stood, lifting the girl into his arms as the K9 followed close behind. The rain didn't matter, the cold didn't matter. All that mattered now was keeping her safe, keeping that old teddy bear close, and surviving the storm together. As they moved towards shelter, the girl's voice broke through the chaos, barely audible over the storm's roar. "Please, don't send me back." The words were a heartbreaking whisper, a plea that cut through the soldier's heart. It was a reminder that this was just the beginning of their journey, and the girl's past, whatever it had been, was far from over. The storm raged on, but in that moment, they were no longer just strangers. They were survivors, bound by an unspoken promise to face whatever came next, together. The rain had not let up, and the world around them seemed to blur into an endless wash of grey. The soldier held the girl tightly, shielding her from the storm as best as he could. His coat was soaked through, and the K9, despite its thick coat, shook with every gust of wind. Yet the soldier didn't seem to mind. His focus was entirely on the girl in his arms, her frailty almost breaking his heart. They found shelter in a small abandoned cabin on the outskirts of the forest. The door creaked as the soldier pushed it open with one hand, carefully guiding the girl inside. He motioned for the K9 to stay outside for a moment while he checked the interior for safety. The cabin, though weathered and worn, was dry and protected from the storm. It would do for the night. The soldier set the girl down gently on a dusty old chair, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. Her eyes had closed, exhaustion overwhelming her. He knew the kind of tiredness she felt, the kind that wasn't just physical, but deep in the soul. His K9 whined softly at the door, sensing its owner's distress. The soldier glanced at the dog, then back at the girl, before walking over and letting the dog in. The K9 immediately padded over to the girl sitting at her feet, its presence both comforting and protective. The soldier removed his jacket, dripping wet from the storm, and hung it on a hook by the door. He glanced out the window at the dark, stormy night, his mind drifting. It wasn't the first time he had found himself in a situation like this. Not the first time he had saved someone, though this felt different. This was more than just an act of duty. The K9 curled up near the girl's feet, sensing the tension in the room. The soldier's fingers brushed over the worn edges of a letter he had tucked inside his jacket. A letter from home, if home could still be called that. He opened the letter slowly, the words feeling like they belonged to a lifetime ago. The handwriting was familiar, comforting, his wife's, but it felt like a distant memory. She had written him once, right before he left for his last deployment. The letter was filled with love, hope, and an unspoken promise that she would be waiting for him when he returned. The soldier's hand trembled slightly as he read her words again. "Come back to me. Come back for our son." She had written, though he knew, deep down, that he would never return the same. He had left for war, and now he was forever changed by what he had seen and done. The soldier folded the letter carefully and tucked it away. He sat down next to the girl, watching her as she slept fitfully. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cabin, it was quiet. Too quiet. The K9 lay beside her, its watchful eyes never leaving her side. The soldier could feel the weight of his own sorrow, but he couldn't let it show. Not now. Not in front of this girl who had lost so much. He had made promises before. Promises to his wife, to his comrades. Promises he had failed to keep. But this was different. He could keep this promise. He could keep her safe. His mind wandered again. The memories of war, of the things he had seen and lost, flooding back. The soldier had seen the worst of humanity, felt the weight of so many lives lost. But there was still something inside him, a flicker of light, of hope that hadn't been extinguished. That something had driven him to return home after every mission, to fight for something beyond survival. And now that something was sitting in front of him. A girl, no older than his own child, lost and broken, clutching an old teddy bear as if it were her only anchor to this world. The K9 raised its head, sensing the soldier's emotions. It padded over to him and sat beside him, leaning its body against his. The soldier rested a hand on the dog's fur, grateful for the quiet comfort it offered. It was always the same, loyal, patient, and ever watchful. The girl shifted in her sleep, and the soldier turned, his attention back to her. Her small fingers still clutched the teddy bear tightly. He wondered where it had come from, what memories it held. Was it from her parents? Was it the last piece of a life she had lost? He could only imagine the pain she had endured. As the storm continued to rage outside, the soldier found himself looking down at the canine, then back at the girl. "We'll make it through this," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The sound of the rain tapping against the roof seemed to fill the silence. The soldier closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to breathe. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to let this girl face it alone. She had already suffered enough. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts, the sound harsh against the stillness of the room. The soldier tensed, his instincts kicking in. The canine immediately stood, its body tense and alert. But before the soldier could reach for his weapon, the door creaked open slowly, revealing nothing but the relentless storm. It was just the wind. "Guess we're not alone in this fight," the soldier muttered, looking out into the storm, his eyes narrowing. "But we will be, for now. Just us." With a heavy sigh, he closed the door, bolting it shut, and turned his attention back to the girl, who had stirred again. And that's when it happened, the first flicker of something more than just survival, hope. The storm outside continued its relentless assault, the wind howling and the rain drumming on the roof like 1,000 urgent footsteps. Inside the cabin, it was quiet, save for the occasional crackle of the fire the soldier had started in the small stove in the corner. The warmth from the fire spread slowly, but it couldn't chase away all the cold in the room, the cold that lingered in the air, the cold that seemed to seep into the very bones of those who had been left behind by the world. The girl had been asleep for hours, though it hadn't been restful. Her sleep was fitful, filled with small, jerking movements, as if she were trapped in some distant nightmare, her grip tightening on the teddy bear. The soldier kept his distance, but he watched over her, feeling a strange responsibility that he couldn't explain. The canine was asleep by the fire, its head resting on its paws, its breathing slow and steady. The soldier knew the dog well. It had been by his side for years, through every mission, every hardship, never wavering in its loyalty. The canine was more than just a companion. It was family. The soldier leaned back in his chair, looking at the girl. Her clothes were still damp, but she had stopped shivering. He hadn't spoken to her much since they first met, but something told him she wasn't ready to open up yet. And he didn't push. He had learned long ago that people, especially those who had been hurt, needed time. Time to heal, time to trust again. And trust, he knew, was something that had to be earned, not demanded. A soft moan from the girl pulled him from his thoughts. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment she just stared at him, confusion and fear clouding her gaze. She seemed to forget where she was for a second, lost in the fog of her own mind. But then the teddy bear came into focus, and she clutched it closer, as if it was the only thing tethering her to reality. "Hey," the soldier said softly, his voice a steady anchor in the silence. "You're safe. It's just the storm outside." The girl blinked, still disoriented, but she nodded slowly. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper. Where am I?" "In a cabin," the soldier replied, keeping his tone calm. "You're safe here for now. The storm's bad, but it'll pass." She nodded again, her eyes glancing toward the canine, who was now sitting up, its gaze never leaving her. The girl's lips trembled slightly, but she didn't speak. Instead, she buried her face in the teddy bear again, as if it were the only comfort she could find. The soldier stood, stretching his legs, and walked over to the small stove. He added more wood to the fire, the crackling sound filling the silence. He knew the girl needed time, and he could give her that. But he also knew that if they were going to survive together, they had to learn to trust each other. He cleared his throat, his eyes never leaving the girl. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated, her fingers nervously playing with the frayed edges of the teddy bear's paw. "Lily," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "My name's Lily." "Lily," the soldier repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. It felt right. "I'm Sergeant Miller, and this here's Max," he said, gesturing to the K9, who tilted its head at the mention of its name. "We'll be looking out for you." Lily didn't say anything at first. She just looked at Max, her gaze softening slightly as she studied the dog. The soldier could see the small change in her, the tension in her shoulders easing just a little. She was starting to trust them, but it was a slow process. Max stood and walked over to Lily, sitting at her feet once more, his large body curled protectively at her side. The girl's hands shook as she reached down to pat the dog's head, her fingers grazing its fur. Can I keep him?" she asked, her voice so soft it was barely more than a breath. The soldier's heart twisted at the question. "You can keep him," he said quietly. "He's a good boy. He'll keep you safe." Lily's face softened, a fragile smile breaking through the veil of fear. For the first time she looked almost peaceful. The bond between her and the K9 was forming, slowly but surely. It was a bond that didn't require words, only presence. Max had already recognized her vulnerability, her loneliness, and offered what comfort he could. The soldier watched the exchange, a lump forming in his throat. He had seen a lot in his time, but nothing had struck him as deeply as seeing this small, fragile girl begin to trust again. She had been through so much, and yet here she was, taking the first steps toward healing. "Before we get too comfortable," the soldier said, his voice steady but with a hint of concern, "I should let you know something. The storm isn't the only thing we need to worry about. There are people out there who might be looking for you." Lily's head jerked up at his words, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you mean?" she whispered, clutching the teddy bear even tighter. The soldier leaned forward, his expression serious. "I don't know the whole story, but I think you ran away from someone. And they might not stop until they find you." He paused, his eyes softening as he saw the terror in her gaze. "But I'm here, Lily, and I won't let anyone hurt you." The girl nodded silently, her small form trembling again. But this time it wasn't from the cold. It was fear. The fear of being hunted, of being forced back into whatever nightmare she had fled. Max stood again and padded over to her side, offering his silent support. Lily placed a hand on the dog's head, and he leaned into her touch, as if to reassure her that she wasn't alone anymore. The soldier stood, moving to the window, his eyes scanning the dark, storm-lashed forest outside. He didn't know who was after her, but one thing was clear. Whoever it was, they wouldn't stop. And neither would he. Lily had already suffered too much. He wouldn't let anyone take her again. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cabin, amidst the shelter and warmth, something began to heal. Slowly but surely, trust was being built. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead would be long, but for the first time in a long while, the soldier felt a glimmer of hope. And he would do everything in his power to protect it. The storm outside had settled into a steady, relentless drizzle by morning. The sky, once an angry tumult of clouds, now held only a dull grey, as if the world itself had forgotten the violence of the night. The cabin, though small and humble, was dry and warm, providing a fragile sense of security amidst the chaos outside. Yet the air inside was thick with unspoken tension. Lily, though no longer trembling from the cold, sat huddled in a corner by the fire, her eyes distant. She had barely spoken since the soldier's revelation about the danger outside. She clutched the teddy bear tightly to her chest, as though it were the only thing anchoring her to this world. Max, ever vigilant, lay at her feet, his watchful eyes never leaving her. The canine's presence, though silent, was an undeniable comfort, its calmness seeming to seep into Lily, easing her raw anxiety just a little. Sergeant Miller had gone outside early that morning, cautiously surveying the surroundings. He wasn't sure who or what might be after the girl, but his instincts as a soldier told him they weren't safe here. The forest surrounding the cabin was dense and wild, offering plenty of cover, but also potential dangers. He'd checked the perimeter, ensuring the cabin remained untouched by anyone who might have followed them. No signs of immediate threats, but the unease gnawed at him. Whoever was after Lily, they wouldn't be easy to shake off. The soldier had always trusted his instincts, honed by years of experience, but he couldn't ignore the gnawing fear in his gut. Protecting Lily wasn't going to be as simple as keeping her safe from the storm. There were bigger dangers ahead, ones he wasn't yet prepared for. Returning inside, he scanned the room, his gaze landing on the girl. "We need to move," he said, his voice low and steady. Lily looked up at him, her expression confused and apprehensive. "Move," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The soldier nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "We can't stay here for long." "It's not safe." The girl's grip tightened on the teddy bear, but she didn't argue. There was a resignation in her eyes, as if the weight of her past had already prepared her for this moment, for the constant uncertainty of never being able to rest. She was used to running, used to being on the move, but that didn't make it any easier. "Where will we go?" she asked, her voice small. The soldier's eyes softened, but his resolve remained firm. "We'll figure that out once we're on the move. For now, we need to leave quickly. I'll get our things ready. You stay here with Max." As he moved about the cabin, gathering the supplies they had, he noticed Lily's anxious gaze following him. Her small hands were shaking, and her eyes darted to the window every few seconds, as though expecting someone to appear at any moment. She wasn't afraid of the soldier. She was afraid of what might be coming for her. Max stood and padded over to Lily's side, nudging her gently with his nose. She reached down to pet him, her fingers trembling. The dog's warm presence seemed to soothe her, but it wasn't enough to erase the fear that clung to her like a shadow. When the soldier had gathered the last of their things, a few provisions, a couple of blankets, and a small first aid kit, he stood in the doorway, looking out into the darkened world beyond. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. "We're leaving now. We'll head toward the mountains. It's a long way, but it'll give us some cover." Lily stood, hesitating for a moment, before walking toward the door. Max followed, his eyes locked onto her, ready to protect her at all costs. She reached for the soldier's hand as they stepped outside, and he grasped it gently, offering a quiet reassurance that spoke volumes. They had made it this far together. They would make it further. The first steps out into the rain were heavy, the weight of the journey ahead settling on their shoulders. The soldier could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, but there was no turning back now. They couldn't stop. Not until they were far from anyone who might be searching for them. As they moved through the forest, the rain continued to fall, turning the ground beneath their feet to mud. The soldier kept a sharp eye on their surroundings, his senses alert. Max led the way, his nose to the ground, tracking any sense that might lead them to danger. It was slow going, the terrain difficult, but they made their way through the dense forest. The soldier's mind raced as he thought of what might be waiting ahead. They had no clear plan, no destination, only a vague idea that the mountains might offer them some kind of protection. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. Lily walked quietly beside him, the weight of the teddy bear a constant reminder of everything she had lost. She was quiet now, not speaking, not asking questions. Her eyes were focused ahead, her face pale with worry. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made her flinch. The soldier could see the fear in her eyes, and it reminded him of his own daughter, the one he had left behind when he went to war. He wondered, fleetingly, if she was still waiting for him, if she had ever felt the same fear in her heart. Max suddenly stopped in his tracks, his ears pricked, nose twitching. The soldier tensed, instinctively reaching for his weapon, though he knew it wasn't the first time the K9 had sensed something they couldn't see. "Stay close," he muttered to Lily, his voice low but urgent. Max moved forward cautiously, his tail stiff with alertness. The soldier followed, his eyes scanning the surroundings, every sense sharpened to the edge. There was something out there. He could feel it, the way the air seemed to thicken with tension. Then, from the shadows of the trees, a figure stepped forward. The soldier's heart stopped. It was a man, clothed in dark, weathered clothing, his face hidden beneath a hood. He stood still, just watching them, his gaze cold and calculating. He said nothing at first, but the soldier's gut twisted. He didn't need words to know who this man was. Lily gasped, and the soldier stepped forward, instinctively positioning himself between her and the stranger. "Who are you?" the soldier demanded, his voice rough with authority. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but the soldier could feel the presence of something dangerous, something that didn't belong here. Max growled low, his hackles raised, a deep warning that hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. The figure took a slow, deliberate step forward, his hands raised, palms open in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice gravelly. "But she's mine." The soldier's blood ran cold. The forest stood still as if holding its breath, and the soldier's heart raced in his chest. His grip tightened around the handle of his weapon, but he didn't draw it just yet. The man in front of them wasn't making any threatening moves, but the chill in the air told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't just some wanderer lost in the storm. The figure's eyes, hidden beneath the hood, were cold and calculating, watching the soldier intently. Max growled again, his body tense, but the soldier held up a hand, signaling for the dog to stay calm. "What do you want?" the soldier asked, his voice steady, but his mind was already racing. Who was this man? Why did he claim to know Lily? The figure's lips twitched into something that could have been a smile, but there was no warmth behind it. "She doesn't belong here," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel scraping across stone. "She belongs with me." The soldier took a step forward, positioning himself in front of Lily without thinking. He could feel her presence behind him, her silent fear pressing into his back like a weight. He could hear her breath quicken, and the tightness in her grip on the teddy bear sent a wave of guilt through him. She was scared, and whatever this man's claim was, it terrified her. Lily stepped forward hesitantly, the soldier's protective stance the only thing keeping her from darting away. She raised her eyes to the man, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes shifted, scanning her face as if seeing something deeper than just her physical appearance. His lips parted slightly as he looked her over, before finally speaking. "You don't remember me, do you?" Lily's face twisted with confusion. What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice wavering as she clutched the teddy bear tighter. The soldier could feel the tension rise again, the air thickening with unspoken history. He glanced over his shoulder at Lily, his brow furrowing. "What is he talking about?" Lily hesitated, her small hands trembling at her sides. I don't know," she whispered, her eyes flickering between the soldier and the stranger. The man took a step forward, this time slowly, but the soldier immediately stepped in his path, blocking him with a raised hand. "Stay back," he ordered, his voice low but firm. The stranger stopped but didn't back away. He wasn't afraid of the soldier, that much was clear. He seemed to have an unsettling calm about him, as though he knew something the soldier didn't. Lily's voice trembled again. "Please, Just leave us alone." The soldier looked back at her, his heart aching for her fear. He turned to the man. "Who are you, and what do you want with her?" The stranger let out a long, almost sorrowful sigh. "I'm not here to hurt her," he said, his voice heavy with something that could have been regret. "But she doesn't belong with you. She belongs with her family." The soldier's stomach churned. Family? He thought of his own family, the daughter he had left behind, but something in the man's words didn't sit right. He didn't trust him, not for a second. "What do you mean?" the soldier demanded. "She's not going anywhere with you." The stranger's face darkened. "You don't understand. She's my niece. I've been looking for her for a long time." His words were clipped, full of frustration. "Her parents. They sent her away, and she's been hiding from me ever since." Lily gasped, her face paling, as she took a step back. "Niece?" she stammered, her hand clutching the teddy bear like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. The soldier glanced between them, his mind working furiously. If this man was telling the truth, if he was really her family, then why did Lily look so terrified? Why had she run in the first place? He could see it in her eyes now, the recognition, the flicker of something dark, something painful. The soldier's gut twisted. "No," Lily whispered, shaking her head. "I don't want to go with you. I don't remember you. I can't." The stranger stepped closer again, his face hardening. "You don't have to remember. You just have to come with me. Your parents have been worried sick. They'll be glad to see you." Lily's knees buckled slightly and she staggered, her eyes filling with tears. "No!" she cried, a desperate note in her voice. "I don't want to go, please, I can't go back there." The soldier's heart shattered for her. He stepped forward again, putting himself between Lily and the stranger, his stance unwavering. "She's not going anywhere with you," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The man's eyes narrowed, and for a moment the soldier thought he saw something shift in them, anger, perhaps, or maybe even fear. But it was gone as quickly as it had come. He raised his hands, palms out, in a gesture of surrender. "I'm not going to force her," he said, his voice softer now, though still filled with an unsettling coldness. "But you don't understand. She has to come with me. It's for her own good." Lily was shaking now, tears streaming down her face. "You don't know what they did to me," she whispered, the words barely audible. "They're the ones who hurt me. They kept me locked away and... The stranger's face faltered for a second, his mask of calm cracking just slightly. "You're confused. You don't understand. They just wanted to protect you." "No!" Lily screamed, stepping back into the soldier's protective shadow. "They locked me up. They wanted to use me." The soldier's eyes shot to the stranger, and in that moment the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. The story didn't add up. There was something off about this man's claim. And Lily's fear, it wasn't the fear of a child being separated from her family. It was the fear of someone running from something terrible. This man wasn't here to protect her. He was the one she was running from. The soldier clenched his jaw, his hands instinctively tightening around the weapon at his side. The K9 growled again, low and threatening. "Get away from her," the soldier growled, his voice hard and unyielding. The stranger paused, and for the first time there was hesitation in his eyes. "You don't know what you're getting into," he warned, his voice dark. "She's not what you think she is." Lily clung to the soldier's arm now, her fear palpable. He didn't know what kind of horrors she had endured, but one thing was clear. Whatever this man's claim, whatever the truth of her past, the soldier wasn't about to let her face it alone. "We're leaving," the soldier said firmly, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. The man stood still for a long moment, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. But finally, with one last look at Lily, the stranger turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving behind only the echoes of his warning. The soldier let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He turned to Lily, his heart aching for the fear and pain in her eyes. "We're safe for now," he said quietly. "But we need to keep moving. We're not stopping until we're out of here." Lily nodded weakly, but there was a new spark in her eyes now, a flicker of defiance, of strength. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but for the first time in a long time, Lily wasn't alone. And she was determined to never be again. The forest seemed to close in around them as they continued their journey, the dense trees offering little comfort from the persistent drizzle. The tension in the air was thick, every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch, sending Lily into a state of heightened awareness. The soldier, too, couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The encounter with the stranger had left an unsettling mark on him. Whoever that man was, he wasn't done yet. And the threat of him finding them again seemed all too real. Lily walked quietly beside him, Max trotting dutifully at their side. She was still clutching the teddy bear, her knuckles white from the pressure. The soldier couldn't shake the image of her fear, the desperate plea in her voice when she had said, "I can't go back there." Whoever her family was, they were not the guardians she needed. She was running, and the soldier now understood that there was more to her escape than simple rebellion. They had been on the move for hours, the terrain getting more treacherous with every passing step. The storm had left the ground muddy and slick, making it hard to maintain any real speed. Yet they had no choice but to keep going. The soldier was determined to put as much distance between them and that stranger as possible. The mountains were still a day's walk ahead, and if they didn't reach some sort of shelter soon, they risked losing precious time in the face of whatever danger might be following them. As they crossed a small creek, the soldier noticed Lily's pace slowing. She had been walking in silence for the last hour, her gaze vacant, distant. The weight of whatever haunted her was palpable. He had seen it before, the hollow look in someone's eyes when they had faced too much, when the strain of survival was beginning to crack them open. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low but not unkind. He glanced over at her, but she didn't respond right away. She simply kept walking, her eyes trained on the path ahead. Lily's shoulders were hunched, her every step slower than the last. She seemed to be carrying the weight of something invisible, something too heavy for her small frame. The soldier didn't press her for an answer, though he could tell she was struggling. It wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was the emotional toll, the memories. Whatever had happened to her, the trauma was deeper than any injury he could tend to with his medical kit. Finally, Lily spoke, her voice a mere whisper, barely audible over the sound of the creek rushing beside them. "I'm sorry," she said, her words hanging in the damp air. The soldier didn't need to ask what she was apologizing for. He had seen the fear in her eyes earlier, the desperation when she had spoken about her past. He didn't know what she had been through, but he could feel it, the trauma that clung to her like a second skin. And in that moment he realized that his role wasn't just about keeping her safe from the physical dangers around them. He had to help her find a way to heal, to come to terms with whatever nightmare she was running from. "You don't need to apologize," the soldier said softly. He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You're not alone in this anymore. We'll get through it. Together." But Lily didn't seem to hear him. She stared at the ground, her breath shallow and unsteady. "I didn't want to leave," she said, her voice cracking, the words barely audible. "I didn't want to run away, but they made me. They locked me in that room. They—" She stopped, choking on the words, the pain too raw to continue. The soldier felt a wave of sorrow and protectiveness wash over him. He had no idea what she had been through, but he could see the weight of it in her eyes, in the trembling of her hands. He stepped closer, reaching out cautiously, as if afraid of pushing her too far. "You don't have to say anything you're not ready to," he said, his voice steady but filled with compassion. He paused, waiting for her to acknowledge him, to let him in. "But I need you to know that I'm here. You're safe with us. I'll make sure no one hurts you again." Lily lifted her head slowly, her tear-filled eyes meeting his. There was so much fear in them, so much doubt, but underneath it, there was also a flicker of hope, a hope that had long been extinguished. The soldier could see it, that spark of life, fragile but real. She was still fighting. "Why did you help me?" she whispered. "Why did you choose to protect me?" The soldier's heart ached as he considered her question. He had never thought about it in those terms. To him, it was instinct, simple and yet profound. Protecting someone who had no one left to protect her. "Because you're worth protecting," he said quietly. "You deserve a chance at life, Lily. You deserve peace." The words hung in the air, their weight more powerful than any weapon. For a long moment there was silence between them, and for the first time the soldier saw a shift in her. Something in her eyes softened. She wasn't just running anymore, she was starting to believe. Starting to trust again. But just as the moment seemed to settle into something fragile and beautiful, a sudden noise shattered the quiet. A rustle in the underbrush. Max's ears perked up immediately, and the soldier instinctively reached for his weapon, his body going rigid. The rustling came again, closer this time. The soldier's heart rate quickened. "Stay behind me," he whispered to Lily, his voice sharp, alert. Max growled low in his throat, and the soldier motioned for him to stay back. Slowly, he moved to the edge of the path, scanning the trees. Something was wrong. His instincts screamed at him to move quickly. Then, from the shadows of the trees, a figure stepped into view. It wasn't the same man as before. It was someone else. The soldier's grip tightened on his weapon, his pulse racing. The figure was tall, thin, wearing dark clothes that blended into the shadows. The stranger's face was obscured, hidden behind a scarf and dark glasses, but the way they moved was unmistakable, deliberate, calculating. Lily stepped back, her fear palpable, and the soldier positioned himself in front of her once again, protecting her without hesitation. "You're not welcome here," the soldier said, his voice steady but commanding. The figure didn't speak at first, but the soldier could feel the tension in the air. Something dangerous was coming, and this time they might not be able to escape so easily. The figure in front of them didn't speak immediately, and for a long, tense moment, everything seemed to freeze. The soldier's eyes were locked on the figure, calculating, assessing. Whoever this person was, they weren't here by accident. The way they moved, the calculated stillness, it was clear they were no stranger to confrontation. Lily's breathing quickened again, her body instinctively pressing closer to the soldier, her small frame shaking despite the warmth of the rain-soaked air. Max, standing beside them, growled softly, but low enough to remain unnoticed to the stranger. It was a quiet, warning growl, one that didn't need any words to explain its meaning. The soldier took a deep breath, his mind working through the options. He could confront this person, but he wasn't willing to risk Lily's safety without understanding what they were dealing with. "What do you want?" the soldier asked, his voice steady, though the tension in his body made it clear that he was ready for whatever this person intended. The figure finally moved, stepping closer with a slow, deliberate pace. Their face remained hidden behind the scarf and dark glasses, but something about the way they carried themselves told the soldier that they weren't here for a friendly conversation. "I'm looking for someone," the figure said, their voice muffled but clear. There was no malice in their tone, but there was an edge of urgency that set the soldier on high alert. "Someone who's been lost for a long time." The soldier's grip tightened around his weapon. He wasn't sure where this was going, but his instincts screamed at him to keep pushing. He wasn't about to let another stranger get close to Lily, no matter what they said. "She's not lost," the soldier replied, his voice low and firm. "She's not going anywhere with you." The figure stopped in their tracks, their posture rigid as they looked at the soldier, though their face remained obscured. A heavy silence settled between them before the stranger finally spoke again, the words heavy with what could only be described as regret. "She's not safe with you," the figure said, their voice betraying a hint of sorrow. "You don't understand who's really after her." Lily's breath caught in her throat, and she clutched the teddy bear harder, her knuckles white. The soldier felt a flare of protective anger surge inside him at the mention of Lily not being safe, but he forced himself to stay calm. He couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. "Who's after her?" the soldier demanded. "Who are you, and why do you think you have any right to claim her?" The stranger seemed to hesitate for a moment before they took a step back, lowering their hands. There was a vulnerability in their movements, something the soldier hadn't expected. "I'm trying to protect her," the figure said quietly, as though speaking to himself as much as to the soldier. "You don't know what she's been through. You don't know what her family's capable of." The words hit the soldier like a jolt of electricity. Family. He had heard that word too many times in the last few hours, but it never felt like it was used in the right way. Lily didn't need to be saved by someone who claimed to be her family. She needed someone who would protect her from them. Lily flinched, a broken sound escaping her lips. The soldier turned to her, his eyes filled with concern, but she only shook her head. "You don't understand," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. They weren't my family." "They were monsters. They kept me locked away, and they hurt me." The soldier's heart clenched as he turned back to the stranger. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about survival. Lily was running from something much worse than this stranger, and whatever the truth was, he wasn't going to let her face it alone. "She's not going with you," the soldier said again, this time with more force. "Not now, not ever. She's been through enough, and it's my job to make sure no one takes her again." The stranger's shoulders slumped as they seemed to process the soldier's words, their head dropping slightly. For a moment, they appeared lost, as if the weight of the situation had suddenly dawned on them. Then, with a deep sigh, they took off their glasses, revealing eyes that had seen too much. Their gaze softened, a quiet understanding passing between them. "I'm not here to hurt her," the figure said, their voice quieter now, tinged with something that felt like sorrow. "I was trying to protect her, but I see now. She's not the same girl I knew." The soldier's grip on his weapon relaxed just a little, but he didn't let his guard down. He still didn't trust this person, but the stranger's sudden vulnerability gave him pause. Could there be more to this than just a simple claim of family? The figure turned to Lily, their eyes filled with regret. "I wasn't supposed to let them do that to you. I failed you." The words seemed to break something inside of the stranger, their voice choking with emotion. Lily recoiled at their words, but there was something else, something deeper. Despite her fear, despite the deep scars she carried, there was a flicker of something else in her eyes now, a quiet, almost imperceptible understanding. The soldier placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. "You're not alone anymore," he said, his voice soft but filled with certainty. "We're in this together. No one's going to hurt you again. I'll make sure of it." The stranger looked at them for one last time, their eyes haunted. They were silent for a long moment, before speaking again, their voice quieter. "I tried to protect you, but now it's too late. There's nothing more I can do." The stranger gave one last glance at Lily, their gaze filled with a silent apology, and then turned to walk away, disappearing into the trees. The soldier watched them go, his thoughts swirling. He didn't know who this person was or what their true intentions had been, but one thing was clear: they weren't a threat to Lily anymore. Whatever they had been trying to protect her from had only served to push her further into the storm. He turned back to Lily, who was standing motionless, her face pale and tear-streaked, the teddy bear clutched tightly in her hands. "You're safe now," he said gently, kneeling in front of her. "We're going to make it through this, okay?" One step at a time, Lily's eyes met his, a mixture of pain and uncertainty in them. But there was something else there too, something fragile but real. Hope. Max sat down beside her, his warm presence offering a quiet reassurance. The soldier smiled softly at her, offering his hand. "You don't have to face this alone anymore. I'm here, and I won't let go." Lily took his hand, her fingers trembling at first, but with a steadying breath, she squeezed it. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe, and together they would move forward. The rain had finally stopped, leaving only the lingering scent of damp earth and the sound of dripping leaves in the aftermath. The forest, though still shadowed by towering trees, seemed less oppressive now, as if the storm had washed away some of the weight it had carried. The air was crisp, and the sky above was clearing, revealing faint hints of the stars. The soldier, Lily, and Max walked in silence, their steps synchronized, a small unit bound together by more than just survival. The distance between them and the stranger had grown with each step, but the heaviness of the moment still lingered. The events of the past few days weighed on Lily, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes now, something the soldier hadn't seen in her since they first met. They had come a long way, both physically and emotionally, and though the journey was far from over, there was a quiet sense of resolution in the air. The soldier could feel it, the change in Lily, the small yet significant shift that made her more than just a scared girl running from her past. She was starting to rebuild herself, starting to understand that she wasn't defined by her trauma. She was more than what she had been through. The soldier turned his head to look at her. "We're close now," he said, his voice steady, but with a note of relief. "We'll find shelter for the night. Tomorrow, we'll head into the mountains." Lily nodded, but her gaze remained ahead, distant. She was walking, but part of her was still somewhere else, somewhere trapped in memories she wasn't ready to face. Still, the soldier could see the quiet determination in her face. She was trying to move forward. Max, always the loyal companion, trotted ahead, sniffing the air. The K9 had been a constant source of comfort for both the soldier and Lily. Though it couldn't speak, it had offered a steady, unspoken reassurance that Lily had learned to trust. And in turn, the soldier had come to realize how vital Max's presence was, not just as a protector, but as a reminder of loyalty and unconditional love. As they reached the edge of a small clearing, the soldier noticed a small cabin in the distance. It was modest, but it looked sturdy enough, the kind of place where they could finally rest, a place where they could regroup, let their guard down, if only for a moment. He turned to Lily. "We can rest here for the night. We've earned it." Lily's lips curved into a faint, weary smile. "You're sure it's safe?" "For tonight, yes," the soldier said, his tone firm. "We'll be okay." Max led the way to the cabin, tail wagging, already familiar with the idea of finding a safe place. The soldier and Lily followed, their footsteps lighter now, as if the weight of the journey had begun to ease, just a little. Inside the cabin, the warmth from a small fire flickered in the hearth, casting soft shadows on the walls. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The soldier set down their gear and began gathering kindling, starting a fire to warm the space further. Max curled up by the fire, his eyes half closed as he rested, ever vigilant. Lily sat down near the hearth, her body exhausted but her mind still racing. She stared at the fire, its flickering light casting a soft glow across her face. The teddy bear, which had been her anchor throughout everything, was now beside her, resting against the chair where she sat. The soldier stood for a moment watching her. He knew that the road ahead was uncertain. There were still dangers, still people who might come for her. But there was something in Lily now, something stronger than before. She had survived, and that made her a force to be reckoned with. He walked over to her, sitting down across from her, careful not to crowd her space. He knew she needed this time, this silence. "I'm sorry," Lily said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. The soldier looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "I'm sorry I didn't trust you sooner," she continued, her eyes filled with emotion. "I know you were just trying to help me, and I was so scared I didn't know who to trust anymore." The soldier's heart softened, and he shook his head gently. "There's nothing to apologize for. Trust is something that takes time. I get it." He paused for a moment, thinking of his own struggles, his own broken trust. "You've been through more than anyone should ever have to go through." "It's not easy to let someone in," Lily nodded, wiping away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. The soldier watched her for a moment, letting the quiet settle between them. "Do you feel better?" he asked quietly, his gaze never leaving her face. Lily took a deep breath, as if weighing the question before answering. She looked into the flames, her thoughts drifting. "I feel, like I'm starting to heal. I still don't know if I'll ever be free of it, the memories, the fear. But I'm not alone anymore." The soldier nodded slowly. "No, you're not. And you won't be. Not as long as I'm here." She looked at him then, her expression one of both gratitude and newfound strength. "Thank you for everything," the soldier smiled softly. "You don't need to thank me. This isn't over yet, but we'll face whatever comes next together." Lily's gaze shifted to Max, who was now resting peacefully by the fire, the K9's, loyalty unwavering even in the midst of exhaustion. She reached out and gently petted the dog's fur, a silent thank you to the only other soul who had never left her side. The K9's tail thumped lightly in response, a quiet assurance. The soldier stood and stretched, turning to grab their things and unpack them for the night. As he did, he felt a sense of finality in the air, the feeling that they had crossed a threshold, that they were finally past the worst of it. But deep down, he knew the world outside the cabin still held dangers. There would always be challenges ahead. For now, though, they had found a moment of peace. They had found shelter, warmth, and, most importantly, each other. And that was enough.